Hey everyone, thanks for joining in on this video, and thank you also to those who took a look at my first couple postings on my YouTube channel, and appreciate the comments and some of your feedback, and so thanks for that, and some pointers along the way. So appreciate all that, and hopefully what what you're hearing and will be a a great help to you as things move forward. So I want to keep moving on with the second in this series. I don't know if I mentioned last week what I'm going to try to call it, but I think I'm going to call it Beginnings, and this will be number two in the series called Beginnings. So last week we looked at what I often like to call the most important sentence ever written, and it's the opening sentence of the Bible. So if you didn't catch that last week, take a look. It's still up there, of course, and so it's a nice introduction to what I'm going to say in this video. So today, what I want to do is I want to move into the first page of the Bible, chapter 1, and if we just took a look at one sentence at a time, it'd be pretty slow going. So we're going to do the whole page. I don't know if I'll get through the whole thing this time, because there's just an incredible amount in those few lines, which is very typical of lots of parts of the Bible. But anyway, so yes, Genesis 1. We'll take a look at it. So one way to start thinking about that first chapter of the Bible, and I'm assuming that you might not have read it, so I'll try to be kind of clear about it. And if you want to take a quick look at it, maybe pause the video. You can just go online, and there's any number of websites that'll give you the Bible, and just look up Genesis 1. That story doesn't actually end until a little ways into chapter 2. So if you look up Genesis 1 and 2 together, that might be the best thing. Anyway, so if you paused it and are back, thanks, great, welcome back. So why is this particular page, this particular chapter written? A lot of people, I think, believe that it's there to give a kind of you might want to call it a scientific or a reporter's, a newspaper account of how the world came into existence. And you might be aware that there are sometimes, well, online and lots of other places, constant back and forth between people who see that chapter in that way, and people who have the more typical understanding of how the world came into being, which is through a lengthy process of 13 or 14 billion years, and evolutionary processes and all these kinds of things, which I think is true. So anyway, I don't think it's very helpful to see that first chapter where God speaks and then things come into being as giving us a literal presentation of how the world came into being. So there's that possibility, but I'm not going to go with that one, and you'll see why as we get moving. A second reason why this chapter is written has more to do with what was going on while it was being written, or maybe written and compiled or edited or composed. I mean, there was probably a process. So 3,500 years ago, give or take. I mean, nobody knows for sure. So around this time, the Egyptians were enslaving the Jewish people. So as I mentioned last week, the Egyptians had a view of the world as being full of gods, and the gods were typically at odds with each other, getting into all kinds of troubles, and that the sun god Ra was one of the key gods in holding the world together in an orderly way. He would battle the forces of chaos under the earth, and come up every dawn, and then ride across the sky, and then go back under at sunset. So you can also find this very easy online if you do a search for Nut and Geb. They are the sky god and the earth god. If you do a search for them, you'll see what'll come up quite quickly is a picture, an Egyptian ancient carving or hieroglyphic depiction of the world, and you'll see all these things. So according to that view, the Egyptians were being held in place by the gods, and therefore the Egyptians were able to conquer and enslave their neighbors, which is what happened to the Jewish people. They were slaves in Egypt. So one reason that this page emerges as it does is it's kind of a literary offensive. It's a counter story, a counter narrative to the Egyptian worldview, which was very oppressive towards the Jewish people. And anyway, we'll see how that kind of unfolds. So that's one reason it's written. I think a third way of seeing, a third reason to respond to the question, why is this page there, is that it continues to help people of all times, not just back in the days when the Jews were slaves in Egypt, because it gives us a way of seeing the world as held together by a God who is trustworthy, and a way of seeing the world as a welcoming home for us, for all creatures, but especially for people. So we'll get into some of those things. So I think those two reasons, back when it was written, it provided, a counter story to the narrative of oppression, and it continues. The story continues to offer a way of seeing the world that is, I think, full of hope. So I want to get now to the actual story. So in the story, the world starts off as a kind of a chaotic place, but nevertheless, it's God, the Jewish God, who has created it. So it's one God; He's in charge, and phase one, it's a bit chaotic and so forth, and that's fine. And then God speaks, and the chaos begins to arrange itself in an orderly way. So God's, the first day, God says there's 6 days when God creates the world. In the first day, God says, "Let there be light," and so there's light and there's darkness. Well, that's something. There's some order emerging, right? Second day, let there be water above, water below, and sky in between. So this is a kind of a giveaway to the fact that it's connecting with the Egyptian story, which also, which saw the earth is flat. They saw water underneath it, and there was a domed sky, and there was water above the sky, and the sun god Ra would sail across the sky every day. So in the Jewish way of seeing the world too, that it's some of the key elements are still there. There's water, sky, water. It's kind of like a three layer cake. That second day. In the third day, the land is gathered separate from the water. So these first 3 days, you've got these different territories emerging: light and dark, water and land, and then the land being gathered together in one place, so that dry land emerges. Now, in the next 3 days, God populates all these areas. So He populates the light with the sun, populates the dark with the moon and the stars, populates the water with fish, populates the sky with birds, and populates the land with all kinds of creatures. And finally, when everything's ready, the first people are brought into existence. So, so already there's something happening. I mentioned last week that in this world, it's kind of like the Egyptian world. It's, you know, the way the Egyptians saw it. The Jewish people aren't arguing with any of that. They also see the world as flat, and when they look up in the sky, it looks like a dome, and you know, they see the sun riding across every day, and the moon and the stars come out at night, and so forth, and there's water, and there's dry land, and so forth. So the elements are all kind of there, but the one big difference is that the world is not full of all kinds of gods competing with one another and sometimes at war with each other. Instead, there's one God, and this God is in charge. It's the Jewish God. So this is a huge thing, and you know, if the Jewish God is in charge and the Egyptian gods aren't, that's an interesting start to the story. And I think, you know, if you're a Jewish person living way back then and you're reading this for the first time, you might notice, you know, that if this keeps going forward in the way it looks like it's going to, you know, the days of slavery might someday come to an end. So anyway, that's a little bit of a teaser. We'll get to that part too. But yes, God's in charge. So already the world is kind of a place where you can be confident that, you know, you're meant to be here. I mean, you and I are, you know, we're meant to be here. This is our home. God has made it. It's a trustworthy place in which to live. We might sometimes think, you know, that there are all kinds of chaotic powers around us trying to undermine this or build that, or, you know, sometimes people get very wrapped up in politics, and in some countries, you know, the political parties are at each other's throats all the time, and you know, a lot of name calling, and, you know, if my party's not in charge, wow, you know, all hell's going to break loose, and if the other party's in charge, well, it's going to be pretty bad. And, you know, sometimes people can see the world as a kind of a battleground, you know, between, let's say, you know, medicine and viruses, you know, or we could see it as a battleground between, well, people that think about politics and economics, you know, they sometimes will see it as a battleground between capitalism and socialism, or you know, sometimes people will see the world as a battleground between vegans and meat lovers. I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways of, you know, seeing and construing your world, and it can seem like a battleground and a tough place to eke out a living and to eke out a life. And in some ways, of course, it is, and we'll get into that later on, maybe a couple of sessions in. But fundamentally, the world is a place where you and I are welcome to live and to go about our daily business, you know, and to build our houses and our cities, and have families and libraries and playlists and IT technology, and, you know, to build hope for the future, you know, to remember to appreciate the past, you know, to embrace the present. All these things are there for us because this is our proper home that God has made for us. So this is an amazingly hopeful way of seeing the world. And I think even today with the COVID-19 epidemic, that, you know, it's kind of a cool thing to notice that people are working together to try and resolve this issue, and the kinds of work that's going on. I mean, it's tremendous. It's amazing, and, you know, to me, that's a reflection of the fact that this is our home, and we should be able to confidently, as people, you know, work together to make good emerge, you know, in our world, and to face difficulties together. And there's so many other ways in which, you know, we strive for goodness in the world, and we should be confident that it is appropriate for us to, you know, to work with the good that God has created, to work within and to work with the world and with each other, and to embrace all of that, you know, as the life that God has given to you individually, and also to the human race corporately. So I think we're going to we'll end it there for today. I want to keep our videos to about 15 minutes, and there's a lot more to say about that opening chapter of the Bible, and I want to cover the next. I want to cover the rest of it, hopefully in the next video. So in the meantime, be well. Take seriously what's going on around you, and work with your neighbors and so on to deal with the COVID thing. And I don't want anybody to be hysterical, but I do want you to be taken seriously. That we do need to be working together to get through that. So be well, and I hope things are well with you and your families and whoever's in your household, among your friends and so forth. And may God bless you, and see you next time.